Good morning, Keith Tebow from FRC Media. Thank you for joining us. We're getting closer to the September 6th state primary, and we're doing our best to speak to as many candidates as possible to make sure you make informed choices at the ballot box at the primary. This morning, I'm pleased to be joined by one of the two Republican gubernatorial candidates in the race for governor. Please be joined by Republican Geoff Diehl. Geoff, thank you for joining me. I know we've been trying to work this out for a while. I have with your staff. We wanted to get you here in person. Didn't work out, but we're still glad you're with us to speak to the voters of Fall River. How are you?
Great. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate it. Obviously, having a chance to talk to your audience and everybody I can across the state's important. We did a Berkshires to Boston tour over the last year, and so we've been busy hopping around the state. So I appreciate you accommodating me.
No, thank you for accommodating us and speaking to our voters. One of the things that I have as a first question to many of the statewide candidates is, unless a candidate is from a local, part of the state here, the South Coast, Fall River, a lot of people may not know who Geoff Diehl is. So give your elevator speech. Who is Geoff Diehl and why you want to be our next governor?
Well, the funny thing about it is, Keith, that I actually worked at Point Signs in New Bedford for a number of years.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
with work down in the South Coast area. So I certainly know it, appreciate it. I was just in Battleship Cove the other day getting a tour with the executive director there about what's currently going on, the initiatives they have there. But New Bedford, obviously, I know the city there from working there. I'm from Whitman, not too far away. My wife grew up in the town that we live in. We have two daughters, one who's 20 and one who's 16. My 20-year-old's in college. My 16-year-old is a junior in high school. But, I was 40 years old when I decided to run for state representative in the town that I live in, Whitman. And I represented Abington, Whitman, and East Bridgewater when I was served in the legislature. I was on the Ways and Means Committee for 4 years during my term. And during that time, I had a chance to learn all about exactly how the state spends its finances. The state agencies, I was able to, get to know what they were doing well, some areas where they had need for improvement. But also, in the private sector, my wife and I own a performing arts school that she runs. She was a Broadway dancer when we met. And so she teaches dance and acting and voice to children. We have a couple hundred kids every year that come through the studio, and that's in the town of Hanson nearby. So I help with the business as far as maintaining the facility that we built about 10 years ago, and she runs it. And again, I was a manufacturing representative for Point Signs out of New Bedford for a number of years before I became a state representative. And, I was 40 years old when I ran for state rep. I was on the finance committee in the town of Whitman. I just felt that the current state representative that was in office for our district, he was the vice chair of education, really didn't feel like we were getting what we needed as a community back for the revenue we needed to operate our schools effectively. So I ended up running against him and winning. And since I got up to Beacon Hill, I learned that there was a lot more that, challenges ahead of us. In 2014, I led a repeal of the indexing of our gas tax, our state gas tax to inflation. I felt that it was a formula that was going to really hurt middle to low income families the most. I felt that we had transportation revenue already to handle the projects we needed. And there really was no other tax that would go up automatically without a vote. So I led that repeal effort, and that gave me some, notoriety within the Republican Party. So in 2018, I ran for U.S. Senate against Elizabeth Warren. And even though I didn't win that race, I achieved almost 1 million votes. And that was more than the Democratic nominee for governor at the time. And so I learned some lessons from running in 2018 around the state. And after the pandemic, things that had happened during the pandemic, I was back in the private sector. I thought maybe it's a time for me to take my private sector and public sector experience and make a run for governor. So in July of 2021, I made the announcement that I was going to run for governor. And for the last year, I've been out campaigning for quite a while.
Yeah. So, let me ask you about that. You were the first to declare, first Republican to declare the race for governor. Back then, Governor Charlie Baker still had not made up his mind whether he was going to seek a third term. Did you feel that you could have successfully challenged the governor? And I guess let me ask you, what are some of the things that Governor Baker has done well that you may want to continue, or maybe not done so well, and that may have been why you were potentially going to challenge him this year?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was frustrating for me, again, was some of the decisions from the pandemic, the businesses that were shut down. My wife and I had our business shut down. We had to wait till there was an arbitrary reopening schedule, but many businesses didn't make it out of the pandemic. 40% of restaurants in Massachusetts didn't, and it was, the rules were kind of arbitrary and, ad hoc. It was, if you were a restaurant that served alcohol, you could stay open. If you were a bar that served food, you were shut down for good. The large big box retail stores were allowed to open, but small businesses, mom and pop shops, they were closed. And it really hurt people. And then the enhanced unemployment that people were given to stay at home, or incentivize them to stay home longer, really hurt getting people back into the workforce. But I think the biggest thing that I was frustrated with was the fact that state workers were fired for not getting the vaccine. And I'll tell you, I understand that we all needed to do what we could to try to protect each other during the pandemic. However, I still feel, and I think a lot of people in Massachusetts feel that, the my body, my choice, government should not interfere with your healthcare choices. That is especially true with the pandemic. You had frontline workers like state police officers. You've got people that work for the T, and now we're really understaffed at the MBTA because of it. But you had people that either took an early retirement or they were fired because they did not want to get the vaccine. They either got natural immunity from serving while there was there was no vaccine, or they have underlying health issues that the vaccine may have been a concern for them. So to me, and again, we've seen now with the vaccine, even being boosted doesn't necessarily prevent you from getting it. So, but even still, like just a few months ago, more state troopers were fired for not getting the vaccine. My goal is to get everybody back on day one. I want to rehire every state worker who was fired because of that vaccine mandate clause, and make sure that we get people back into the workforce and make sure the state can provide the services it's supposed to provide. We're in a tough shape right now, and it's hard to get people to get back to work in general if you talk to any private sector company, but especially in state government, we're having a tough time recruiting anybody to work in law enforcement because A, the vaccine mandate, but B, the push against defunding the police over the last couple of years, it really demoralized a lot of people in law enforcement.
So one of the things, Jeff, that is sort of been the norm more than not in recent gubernatorial elections is you have teamed up with candidate Leah Cole who's running for lieutenant governor. Even though you both have separate races in the preliminary, in the primary, when successful, you'll be teamed up on a ticket for November. Talk about your decision to do that, and how will that be helpful for you in the upcoming primary?
Well, yeah, it is unique. The Republicans tend to find a partner in the race, and obviously you get merged together once you pass the primary election day anyway. But Leah and I both served together in the legislature. She helped work with me on that gas tax ballot question in 2014, and she's also someone who went back to after she left the legislature. She went back to her town and became a nurse. It was something she'd always wanted to do. She had her second child while the pandemic was going on. She was pregnant during the pandemic, working on a COVID ward, actually. And when the vaccines came out, she had her baby, and she didn't take the vaccines because she was concerned about the effect on her baby. So she was fired from her job at the hospital. Now, I'm not anti-vaccine. I've been vaccinated, but she just felt that was something that she was concerned about, the risk with the child. So, again, she got very passionate about supporting me for governor. And then when we talked about it, she said, I'd be interested in running for lieutenant governor. I said, that'd be fantastic. So we've been partnered up for the last few months. And, again, I think that she presents a certain perspective coming from the healthcare field that definitely would help round out the work we want to do up on Beacon Hill.
As governor, you may have heard this in your travels. A lot of times, communities outside of 128 and even 495, say the South Coast, Western Mass, a lot of times they'll say, "Well, Boston doesn't care about us," and I'm putting that in air quotes, because it feels that a lot of the political capital is invested in the greater Boston area. Let me just ask you point blank. You mentioned you have some experience in the South Coast. How, as governor, would you represent the entire state, and maybe in particular some initiatives that may be of interest here in Fall River and the South Coast?
Yeah, a great question. In fact, I live in a suburb, and my wife's studio that we have together is in the town of Hanson. We're right near a train station, and one of the things Governor Baker's done is some smart housing initiatives to try to create more affordable multifamily housing units near rail areas. And so, but that needs to get investment as well, as far as infrastructure, sidewalks and things like that in some of the rural and suburban areas. So believe me, I've been feeling it as a state representative that Beacon Hill tends to focus on big cities and then within that 495 beltway. But yeah, Fall River, one of the things people keep talking about with transportation overall is this east-west rail, which I do think we can do. But I also think that South Coast Rail, and maybe even looking beyond where it's the current plan for South Coast, I've talked to some folks in Fall River that think that we could potentially push that rail into Rhode Island and try to see if we can pull some of the tourism that comes from the Newport area up into the Fall River area. I mean, coming over the Braga Bridge, you've got thousands and thousands of people every day. The trick is to get them to get off the bridge and get into Fall River right away, because there's so many things to see before they even get to the Cape or wherever else they're going if they're a tourist. You've got again Fall River, you've got New Bedford, you've got Plymouth, and then you've got all the Cape attractions. I think what we need to do is re-highlight the fact that Fall River is part of that wonderful coast that I think everybody would want to see. And I think now that Brayton Point is under redevelopment, I think we have the potential to have more amenities. I think we need to look at some more hospitality, maybe hotels in the region, try to incentivize some growth in the tourism that area. But I think my job is to make sure that infrastructure is put in place to support getting people off the road and off 195 and into Fall River as much as possible. But beyond that, you're seeing some great revitalization in Fall River to begin with. Restaurants are popping up everywhere. There are signs that I think the economy is doing pretty well. The state right now is taking in record revenue. We've got $5 billion in excess tax revenue. We certainly have the resources to focus on areas outside 495, and Fall River is absolutely one of those areas I want to focus on.
Yeah, that gets me to a broader economic development question. I know a number of candidates I've spoken to thus far on both sides of the aisle are saying that there continues to be too much red tape, too much regulation in terms of small business starting up. As governor, how would you propose ways that will support existing small businesses, but also encourage others to start one?
Yeah, it's funny. Somebody told me that in Boston, it takes 10 different licenses or permits to get a TV put up in your bar or in your restaurant. It's kind of insane. But the thing about it is, when my wife and I opened a small business in the town of Hanson that we have, we had to go through a bit of red tape with the Conservation Commission, obviously the planning and zoning departments, and it takes a while. And sometimes those people that work in town government or in city government don't understand that when you're trying to raise that money for that project and you're trying to get things done on a timeline based on our state's weather, construction can stop or start on a dime based on if there's a snowstorm or if there's rain. So, there's a lot of complications just trying to get a project done, with the money that you have available as in a private sector to begin with. And when you have local or state government putting up a lot of red tape in the way, it makes it harder to make those things happen. And so I do want to streamline the way we can help operate to bring in more businesses. We're losing major businesses in Massachusetts. Smith & Wesson is leaving Springfield out in Western Massachusetts. Raytheon is moving their headquarters down to Virginia. That's been a big mainstay for our area here. So we've got to find ways to recruit businesses back into our state, not just retail businesses, but long-term businesses. I think we're looking at, Amazon obviously in the region has built a lot of these warehouses. Well, what's coming with warehouses is a lot of automation. There's going to be automated warehouse machinery, right? And so I think workforce training to make sure that students are graduating, whether it's Bristol Community College or whether it's the Voc Tech, we're making sure that kids are coming out of the colleges or high schools aligned with the careers that are available for them. So I want to make sure that we're matching the industries with the workforce and vice versa. That'll, I think, create more growth in the Fall River area. So I think there's a lot of ways. The only thing I think should mention too is there's an effort right now to there's a ballot question that's going to be in November that will ask people if they want to add an additional 4% tax to people who earn over $1 million. I just caution against that because people who are high earners in our state tend to be people who reinvest that in their businesses that they've started. It can potentially drive out people from our state. And by the way, we lost 50,000 people in Massachusetts last year because of, I think, high cost, maybe housing, and maybe some other factors, the vaccine mandates, I'm not sure. But the point is, we want to make sure that it's easier for people with that high income to come into our state and invest in that tax that they want to add, that additional surtax is going to really, I think, drive people and capital out of our state.
Yeah. One of your platforms is to be a little more fiscally responsible. One of the things that I think both Democrats and Republicans in the late state legislature will admit is that during the 8 years of Governor Baker, there's been a lot of collaboration. There's obviously been some areas of contention, but by and large, they played well together, especially when it comes to state budgets. There haven't been a lot of vetoes or they've been overridden. Talk about how you want to, implement some fiscal discipline and how you would do that working in conjunction as best you can with the state legislature.
Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't, trying to get taxes, under control. I mean, again, we're taking in record revenue, and it's not the first year that the state has brought in record revenue, and yet the legislature was unwilling to try to help alleviate some of the strain on people with, giving back either a temporary lift of the state's gas tax or some other means. There was going to be a $250 rebate check. They couldn't get that done at the end of session, and it's too bad because there has been pretty much good collaboration for the 8 years between the speaker, the Senate president, and Governor Baker. But there have been areas where they've overridden him. And, that's going to be natural. There's always supposed to be some friction between the different branches. If everybody totally agreed, then, there might be something overlooked. So it's good to have those debates. At the same time, when Governor Baker came in, the MBTA was in crisis. The blizzard had caused the T to shut down. It gave him an opportunity to make some management changes at the MBTA. The problem is we're still in a crisis mode with our MBTA, and the fact that there's been a lot of deferred maintenance for a long time that has caused equipment failures. So we still have to work together as a legislature. I mean, pointing fingers is not going to get that train to run, and that's just a small example of what has to happen around the rest of the state. When Charlie Baker came in, he really wanted to tackle the opioid crisis and really made a lot of progress. But the pandemic, I think, put us in a backwards mode. A lot of people relapsed and we lost good people during the pandemic. We had the most overdose deaths in the state of Massachusetts just this last year. So again, no pointing fingers. Let's just work in the legislature to make things happen, to expand mental health care and expand recovery care beyond the cities and into the suburbs where I think they need to own a lot of those problems.
In terms of education, you mentioned on your website, Jeff, that you want to see parents be more involved with their child's education. And I would expect that would be not only personally in terms of helping their child with their studies, but also getting more involved with local school districts. Talk about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We're seeing in numbers in Massachusetts where I think homeschooling is more than doubled over the last 2 years. We've seen a situation where private schools are starting to, having double-digit increases as well. Boston Public Schools, their student population has dropped below 50,000, which is the first time in decades. So the fact of the matter is, parents, I think, from the pandemic were concerned that public schools weren't really able to handle the conversion over to remote learning very well and felt that their kids were behind. And seems like a portion of them are trying to take some of that education into their own hands. And so, for me, I think giving parents those choices of where they want to educate their kids is important. I know that under Governor Deval Patrick and Governor Baker, there was a lifting of the cap on charter schools. I would like to also see that we give people a chance to maybe use state funds for private schools, like that Supreme Court decision that has allowed that in Maine, for example. Maybe even give people a chance to use their tax dollars towards the homeschooling and the materials they would need for that. So I'd like to create an education savings account that gives people more choices. But the other thing too is voc tech schools. We always have seen, for the last decade at least, even more, a waiting list for kids to get into those vocational schools. And one of the problems, in my opinion, is that the regional school, the funding comes from the regional school and it's moved over to the vocational school. And so when a regional school loses a student, they not just lose the base, let's say it's about $10,000, but they also have the additional $4,000 or $5,000 that the vocational school assesses on top of that, that goes to that vocational school. So unfortunately, it disincentivizes those regional schools to place a child or move them to a vocational school if that might be the best outcome for them. So I'd like to unchain the funding from vocational to the regional school area so that there isn't a decision that's made on finances, but more about what the best pathway is for that child and their career.
Yeah. Let me ask you, obviously you have a Republican opponent coming up on September 6th, Chris Doughty. How do you differentiate yourself between you and Chris as you head into the primary?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that I've served in the state legislature again for 8 years. I know exactly how the Senate, the House operate. I know how they interact with the governor. I know how budgets are put together, and overall, I've had a chance to, like I said, to meet with and talk to state agencies around the state about how they operate. And on top of that, again, he has a private sector experience. So do I. We both own a business, but at the same time, I've spent the last decade really working hard to try to, build some balance on Beacon Hill as well. Right now, in a Republican primary, he's never been involved in Republican politics before. I've been trying to promote candidates for years to try to make sure, because right now there's a supermajority of Democrats in the House and Senate, and that doesn't really lend itself to good debate in the those chambers. And so I think he also voted for, my opponent voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I don't think that really sits well with the base Republicans in our state. So I guess he'll have to explain that for the primary. But yeah, it's coming up soon, and we'll see where the votes lie.
Yeah. As we wrap up, there's so much more I want to speak with you about, but what I will pledge is, when you're successful September 6th, I'd like to have you back on again so we can get a little more in depth on some of the issues and how you would contrast with the Democratic challenger, Maura Healey. We'll do that at that time. But in the meantime, I'm going to give you about a minute to speak directly to the Republican voters of Fall River on why they should consider you on September 6th.
I appreciate it, Keith. Thanks so much. And for the voters of Fall River, just so again, I'm just like you, someone who gets up every day, goes to work, tries to make sure that I can do the best for my family, give them the best opportunities going forward. And so I want to make sure as governor that I give you the best choices. I want to make sure that you can afford to live in Massachusetts, not have to leave it. If you want to retire here, I want to make sure you can find affordable living. If you're looking to stay here, if you're a student or you coming from out of state as a college student, I want to make sure you can look at Massachusetts as a place where you can build your future. So in order to do that, I want to make sure that, parents have all the choices available for their kids with their education. I want to make sure that, all state workers, everybody that works in any field in Massachusetts is not hindered by government getting in the way with healthcare choices or anything that would keep you from living your dream. And I think the American dream is certainly alive and strong in Massachusetts. I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to deliver that for the future. And if you can give me your vote on September 6th and hopefully November 8th as well, I certainly think you won't regret it.
All right, Geoff Diehl, Republican candidate for governor. Thank you for your time. All the best. And hopefully we'll speak to you again between now and November. Thank you for your
Very
time.
good. Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it.
All right. And thank you for joining us here in FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow, and please make a point to vote on September 6th.